It was my 35th birthday, a milestone that's supposed to mean you've got life figured out: mortgage, career, maybe a solid skincare routine. But there I was, surrounded by family in our cozy dining room, staring at a pink frosted cake that looked perfect, like it belonged in a magazine. My mom had baked it, her smile practically glowing as she set it down, my name Julia scrawled in loopy cursive across the top. The candles flickered and everyone was laughing, but something felt off, like the air before a storm. Then my 12-year-old daughter, Zoe, grabbed my hand under the table. Her fingers were ice cold, her face pale as she leaned in close and whispered, "Don't eat the cake, it wasn't a prank." Her eyes were wide, dead serious, and my stomach dropped. This wasn't just a birthday party anymore, it was the start of something unraveling. What was in that cake? Why was Zoe so scared? I didn't know yet, but in that moment, I felt the weight of a secret about to change everything. The dining room was buzzing with that forced cheer you only get at family gatherings, the kind where everyone's smiling a little too hard. It was my 35th birthday, and the table was crowded with the usual suspects. My husband, Ryan, with his easy grin and knack for diffusing tension. My parents, Mom beaming like she'd just won a baking contest, Dad quietly sipping his coffee. My younger sister, Paige, who always seemed to carry a cloud of unspoken complaints. And Zoe, my 12-year-old daughter, who'd been unusually quiet. Since her chilling whisper, "Don't eat the cake," the air felt thick. The overhead lights dimmed to a warm glow that should have been festive but instead made everyone look like they were hiding something. Mom was recording me on her phone, her voice sing-song as she urged, "Make a wish, Julia." I blew out the candles, forcing a smile, but all I could think about was Zoe's pale face and her cold fingers gripping mine under the table. If I had a wish, it was for a moment to breathe, to escape the weight of everyone's expectations. I sat back down. Zoe's hand found mine again, her grip tighter this time, like she was anchoring me to her warning. The cake sat in the center of the table, its pastel pink frosting gleaming under the lights, those stiff sugary swirls looking more like a prop than dessert. Mom sliced it with practiced precision, passing plates around while chatting about how she'd made a vanilla almond, my favorite. Ryan reached for his fork, his smile still casual, oblivious to the storm brewing in my head. Zoe's words echoed, "Don't eat the cake," and her seriousness wasn't something I could brush off. She wasn't the dramatic type, not one for pranks or attention-grabbing stunts. My daughter was the kid who'd rather solve a puzzle than start a fight, so when she said something like that, I listened. Before Ryan could take a bite, I acted on instinct, knocking the fork out of his hand. It clattered onto the plate, and the room went quiet for a split second. "Oops, Butterfingers," I said, forcing a laugh that sounded more like a cough. I leaned in close to Ryan, my voice low and urgent. "Don't eat it," I whispered, my eyes locking with his. He frowned, glancing from the cake to me, clearly confused but trusting enough not to argue. Across the table, Mom's smile didn't waver, but it felt sharper now, like she was daring me to say something. Paige was picking at her napkin, avoiding eye contact, and Dad just sipped his coffee like he hadn't noticed the tension ratcheting up. I couldn't sit there pretending everything was fine. "Bathroom," I muttered, grabbing my phone and bolting from the table before anyone could question me. In the bathroom, I locked the door and pressed my back against it, my heart pounding like I'd just run a sprint. Zoe wasn't the type to make things up, but what could she have heard to make her say something so extreme? I needed answers, but grilling her in front of everyone wasn't an option. Instead, I pulled out my phone and called her, keeping my voice to a whisper. "It's okay, Zoe, just text me what's going on." A moment later, my phone pinged with her message, and my blood ran cold as I read it. I heard them in the kitchen before they brought out the cake. "Grandma and Aunt Paige. They're trying to poison us." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the words. Poison? It sounded insane, like something out of a true crime podcast, but Zoe's certainty cut through my doubt. There was a part of me, buried deep, that wasn't entirely surprised. My family had a way of twisting love into obligation, of making you feel guilty for saying no. Didn't know what was in that cake or why, but I knew Zoe wouldn't lie. Not about this. I took a deep breath, smoothed my hair, and prepared to walk back out there, my mind racing with questions I wasn't sure I wanted answered. I stepped out of the bathroom, my heart still hammering from Zoe's text. They're trying to poison us. The words felt like a punch, but I smoothed my expression, forcing my face into something neutral, like I was just popping back to the table after a quick break. The dining room hadn't changed, same warm glow from the dimmed lights, same pink frosted cake sitting like a centerpiece of Betrayal. But everything felt sharper now, like the volume had been cranked up on a suspense flick. Ryan's plate was untouched, his fork still lying where it fell after I'd knocked it from his hand. Zoe sat rigid, her eyes fixed on the table, her usual spark replaced by a quiet intensity that made my chest ache. My mom was still slicing cake, her smile a little too bright, like she was auditioning for a baking show. Paige fiddled with her napkin, her fingers twitching in a way that screamed guilt. Dad just stared into his coffee mug, as if he could will himself out of the room. Nobody was eating. Not a single bite had been taken, and the silence around that fact was louder than any conversation. I slid into my seat, trying to act like I hadn't just read a message that turned my world upside down. My own slice of cake sat in front of me, pristine, the knife mark clean through its fluffy layers. I pushed it an inch away, a small act of defiance no one seemed to notice, or maybe they noticed too much. "Everything okay, Julia?" Mom asked, her voice syrupy sweet, her eyes flicking to my untouched plate. "Fine," I said, matching her tone, though my throat felt tight. "Just saving it for later." Her smile flickered, just for a second, and I caught it, the tiniest crack in her perfect mom facade. Paige chimed in too quick, "I'm on keto, so no sugar for me." She laughed, but it sounded like a cough, brittle and forced. Dad shrugged, mumbling something about not being hungry, his usual way of dodging conflict. Ryan shot me a sidelong glance, his brow furrowed, picking up on the undercurrent I couldn't hide. Zoe didn't move, her hands folded in her lap, her face a mask of determination I didn't know a 12-year-old could wear. The air felt heavy, like we were all holding our breath, waiting for something to break. I kept my eyes on Mom, then Paige, then back to the cake, trying to piece together what Zoe had overheard. "They're trying to poison us." The word poison felt too big, too dramatic, like something you'd hear on a late-night true crime podcast, not in my suburban dining room. But Zoe's certainty was unshakable, and I trusted her instincts more than my own. I wanted to confront them, to demand answers, but how do you ask your own mother if she spiked your birthday cake without sounding unhinged? So I sat there, my pulse racing, watching every micro expression, every fidget, every forced smile, as if I could decode the truth from their body language. Then came the knock. Not a timid tap, but a firm, deliberate rap, the kind that says someone means business. The room froze. Even the clock on the wall seemed to tick louder, like it was counting down to something inevitable. I stood, my legs unsteady, and crossed to the door, feeling every pair of eyes on my back. I opened it to find 2 police officers, their uniforms crisp under the porch light. The older one, with a calm that suggested he'd seen it all, nodded politely. "Good evening, ma'am. We received a report and need to ask a few questions." My stomach lurched. A report? From who? I didn't have to wonder long, but in that moment, the dining room behind me felt like a stage, and the real drama was about to begin. As the police stood at the door, their presence a stark reminder that my birthday had spiraled into something unthinkable, my mind drifted back to the roots of this mess. Family has a way of weaving invisible threads around you, tightening over years until you're tangled in obligations you didn't sign up for. For me, it started when I was 4, clutching a ratty stuffed rabbit with a chewed ear, my prized possession. Paige, my 2-year-old sister, waddled over and yanked it from my hands, her wails piercing when I tried to take it back. "She's little Julia," Mom said, her tone gentle but firm. "You are the big sister." That was the first time I learned that love meant giving up what was mine. Toys, candy, the last slice of pizza if Paige wanted it, it was hers. I was expected to hand it over with a smile, because that's what big sisters do. It wasn't sharing, it was surrender, a pattern that followed me like a shadow. By the time we were teenagers, the dynamic had solidified. Paige struggled with school, or maybe she just didn't care. Either way, I became her unofficial tutor, her ghostwriter, her lifeline. "Can you help Paige with her essay?" Mom would ask, her voice heavy with expectation. "She's tired, Julia. Just show her how." Showing her turned into doing it. Half her English homework, math problems, even a history project that got her an A she didn't earn. I waited for a thank you, but it never came. Instead, it was just assumed I'd keep giving, like an ATM dispensing favors. By high school, I was exhausted, but saying no felt like betraying some unspoken family code. If you're raised to say yes, saying no feels like a felony, even when it's costing you time, energy, and pieces of yourself. Then came the money. Paige lost her job last year downsizing. Mom said, not her fault. She just needs a little help, Mom insisted. So I started sending Paige $100 every month quietly, like a tax I owed for being the responsible sister. It was supposed to be temporary, but temporary stretched into a year, and Paige stayed jobless, her stress a constant topic at family dinners. Mom called it sisterly generosity. Dad said I was just better with money. Funny how generosity stops feeling generous when it's demanded. Then came the cruise, the big family legacy trip Mom had been planning for years, matching t-shirts, sunset dinners, a shared Google Photos folder labeled The Big Celebration. Ryan, Zoe, and I were set. Cabin booked, vegetarian meals requested. For Zoe, Paige, though, couldn't afford it. She was worn out, recovering, and suddenly Mom's call started. "She's had a tough year, Julia. You've always looked out for her. It's what family does." For the first time, I said no, not a hesitant no, not a maybe later no, but a firm, unflinching no. "She can go if she pays her way," I told Mom. "I'm not covering her anymore." The line went quiet, a cold, heavy pause that felt like a fault line cracking open. "That's your decision," Mom said, her voice clipped, and I could almost hear the shift in her. After years of giving toys, sweaters, essays, money, I'd drawn a line, and they took it as betrayal. Paige didn't call to argue. She just went silent, her silence louder than any tantrum. Mom stopped mentioning the cruise, but the air between us turned sour, like milk left out too long. I didn't realize then how far they'd go to punish me for that no, how they'd see my refusal as a power grab to be countered. Family, I learned, doesn't always forgive you for growing a spine. Sometimes, they'll do anything to keep you in your place, even if it means spiking your birthday cake. The dining room was a pressure cooker, the air thick with unspoken accusations as the police officers stood at the door, their calm professionalism a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding in my head. I barely processed Zoe's text, "They're trying to poison us," when my 12-year-old daughter stood up, her small frame radiating a quiet defiance that made my heart skip. "I called," Zoe said, her voice steady, cutting through the room like a knife. My mom gasped, a sound like she'd been doused with ice water, while Paige choked on a breath, her face flushing red. All eyes turned to Zoe, who didn't flinch. "I heard Grandma and Aunt Paige in the kitchen before they brought out the cake," she said, looking straight at the officers. One of them asked, "Are you sure the cake will work?" The other said, "Yes, they won't be able to go tomorrow, so I thought they were trying to poison us." Her words landed like a thunderclap, simple and unadorned, yet heavy with truth. Paige shot up, her chair scraping against the floor. "That's insane," she snapped, waving a hand as if Zoe were spinning some wild fantasy. "She's a kid." She misheard. She watches too many crime shows. Mom shook her head, her eyes wide with feigned shock. She's always been sensitive, she added, her voice dripping with pity, as if Zoe were the one on trial, but Zoe wasn't backing down. She crossed her arms, her gaze unwavering. You also said, "Don't eat the cake," she told Paige, her tone matter of fact, like she was reading a grocery list. The room went deathly quiet, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. Dad mumbled, "This is getting out of hand," his voice barely audible, as if he could wish the moment away. The older officer, unfazed, glanced at the cake still sitting on the table, its pink frosting now looking more sinister than festive. "We'll need to take that for testing," he said, his tone calm but firm. Mom's face crumpled. "You're joking," she said too loudly, as if volume could undo the situation. "It's standard procedure," the younger officer replied, already pulling out an evidence bag. "Who brought the cake?" Mom raised her hand, her pride faltering. "I did. Vanilla almond sponge for Julia." Her voice wavered, and then, like a dam breaking, she blurted, "It wasn't poison." The words hung there, raw and exposed. Nobody moved. My heart slowed, each beat a heavy thud in my chest. "It was just something mild," Mom continued, her voice speeding up, like she was trying to outrun her own confession. "A laxative to upset their stomachs. They'd feel sick for a day, maybe two, and be fine by lunch. They'd have stayed home, that's all. It wasn't arsenic," Paige hissed, "Mom," a warning under her breath, but Mom kept going, her hands fluttering like trapped birds. Paige needed the trip. "You said no, Julia. You always say no now, like you're better than us because you've got money." I stared at her, the woman who raised me, her words slicing through years of family dinners and holiday cards. "So you drugged us?" I asked, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. "It wasn't drugging," she snapped. "It was nudging." The officers didn't look impressed. "Thank you for your honesty," the younger one said, his tone clipped. "You'll need to stay in town for follow-up. This is now an active investigation," Mom protested. "We have a cruise tomorrow." But the older officer cut her off. "You won't be going." The finality in his voice was like a gavel. Paige sank into her chair, her face pale, while Dad seemed to shrink, his shoulders sagging. Zoe stood beside me, her calm unshaken. The officers bagged the cake, its pink frosting now evidence of a betrayal I couldn't unsee. As we packed for the cruise the next morning, zipping bags and tense silence, I realized we were leaving more than just the house behind. Mom and Paige weren't coming, and for the first time, that felt like freedom. The cruise went on, a blur of ocean waves and forced family photos, but the shadow of that pink frosted cake lingered. Zoe, unfazed, told anyone who asked, cousins, aunts, even a random uncle at the buffet about Grandma and Aunt Paige's plan to make us sick. Her bluntness spread the story like wildfire, whispers trailing us from deck to deck. Back home, an email from the police confirmed it. The cake's frosting hid a laxative, enough to keep us bedridden for days. I posted the report on Facebook. No caption, just the cold truth. The comments poured in, stunned and awkward, but I felt lighter, like I'd shed a weight I'd carried too long. I canceled the monthly payments to Paige's mortgage, deleted the bankroll without a word. When Mom and Dad showed up months later with a tuna casserole, I didn't slam the door, but I didn't invite them in either. "We're still family," Mom said, her voice pleading. I replied, "Family doesn't drug each other." I trashed the casserole and haven't spoken to them since. Zoe still jokes about hacking the cruise bookings to avoid the drama, but I'm just grateful she saw what I couldn't. So, what do you think? Did I go too far or not far enough? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that subscribe button, and ring the bell for more stories that hit close to home.